And what we get at the end of this film is a scene that is both erotic and artistic. And I think this is a very important thing to include in the movie because it proves that yes, it is possible to make something that is artistic, but also within these insane limitations that the industry and the money puts on you. Hey everybody, my name is Nick. I'm a director living in Taiwan, and today we're going to be talking about the film Viva Erotica. Viva Erotica is an erotic comedy film that is about making an erotic comedy film. In the 80s and 90s in Hong Kong, there were these films called Category 3 films, and they were a very popular genre. They were films that nobody under the age of 18 could go see, and they typically featured either gratuitous violence or softcore pornography. The softcore films in particular are very bizarre because the point of the film seems to be to show breasts and simulated sex, but they also had these weird, complex plots. Some of them could be quite unique and interesting and actually fairly artistic, and some of them were as bad and terrible as you would expect. So the interesting thing about this film, Viva Erotica, is that it is itself a Category 3 film, but it is also an art film, and it did end up winning a lot of awards at the Hong Kong Film Award. And I would say it's a great entry into the genre of films about films. And I think this movie would be of particular interest to anybody who's worked on a film set, because there's a lot of kind of universal things that pop up that people who make movies kind of feel and know about, and it explores those feelings really well. The brief synopsis of the story is that Sing is this poor director who desperately wants to make films, and he has a very simple flopped. He goes into a pitch meeting only to find that he is pitching to make a Category 3 film. That's what this gangster financier of films wants him to make. And so he has to decide, is he gonna make this Category 3 film? And when he is convinced to go through with it by his girlfriend and his producer and his other filmmaker friends, he has to struggle with reservations about the fact that what he's making is, in the end, pornography, when he really wants to be an artist. So how does he kind of walk that line of creating this thing that is in the end gonna be a sex movie? How does he make that something that is artistic and that he can be proud of? The film itself is very meta, and it takes a lot of artistic tangents using these dream sequences. The movie opens with Sing and his girlfriend having sex, and he imagines that he's directing the scene. And things like this happen throughout the story. He has these dream sequences where he imagines like what people are going to think about the movie, or him directing these different scenes, even though it's not actually happening. And because the movie Viva Erotica itself is so artistic and expressionistic, you kind of understand that the movie within the movie that the director is making is actually this movie, Viva Erotica. So he is making the movie that we're watching in the movie that we're watching. I find that the way that the plot and the scripts develop in a lot of Hong Kong films actually is very stream of consciousness. It's not this rigid 3-act structure that a lot of people are used to in films. We just get these events. It's almost like life rolling on, where something happens and then it affects this other thing, and then this other thing happens and then something else happens, and then we end up somewhere different. So one example is like in the middle of the film, the director Sing goes to this popular sex movie to get inspiration for the film that he's making. And at the theater, he runs into an art director whose movie's playing next door and is flopped. And incidentally, this director's name is Derek Yee, which is also the name of the director of this movie. So there's a lot of weird meta things that they do very, very consciously in this film. That we then follow that director. We leave Sing and we follow that director, and he goes for a walk and he sees these film students who we've seen before, and they're making this experimental work. And he talks to them very briefly about art, and then he decides, as they're shooting their next scene, to run and jump off a bridge and kill himself. And then we move back into our story about Sing. And while this incident does have a little unrelated effect on the overall plot, like Sing learns about this news and it affects him, and it maybe, we kind of aren't sure, changes his decision about how he's making his movie, it's not this big thing that keeps coming back. It's not this important thing. Whereas I think in more traditional films, like this incident would be either a very important to the A plot or its own B plot that would go on much longer. But this movie's not like that. We have these little incidents that happen, but they don't feel like they're part of this this grand structure. It's almost like I said, very stream of consciousness. Like this happens, this happens, this happens. It's all very fluid and it's all very interesting. I definitely find this film in particular is great evidence that there isn't a standard way that you have to tell a story. You can do these crazy weird things. You can have this dream sequence that comes out of nowhere and is very odd and kind of is more about feeling rather than plot. And you can have these tangents and still have an interesting, compelling story that the audience is going to be willing to follow. I think the camera work in this movie is also very unique and has a very organic feeling to it. They use handheld that moves very naturally throughout the scenes. The movie itself comments on this. Again, this is all meta. Like the movie talks about when to use handheld, why to use handheld. The sex film's cameraman talks about how like there's a cameraman that he really looks up to who's so fluid with his camera. He's able to like move it around and do interesting things that you don't expect. And you see that in the film, like the camera twisting up and around and down and around people's bodies and stuff, which is just very cool. And it makes you think about like, why are we so fixated on certain ways of making and executing movies? Risks are so rare, especially when a product needs to be commercial. And there's this hilarious part of the film where the director shoots a nude scene and he uses a handheld blurry camera like Wong Kar-wai, and then the producer yells at him because he's like, dude, the point of this is to see boobs and see nudity. Like, why are you shooting this like Wong Kar-wai? And it's kind of just this interesting, funny comment on the conflict between wanting to create art and wanting to create something that's commercial and that the producers and the money people want. And so this is the brilliance of the movie, what it says about the struggles of trying to be an artist. You know, the struggle of art is always how to blend money with creating art. And the reality is that very often those two things don't mix. They're in conflict with each other. Like the art that you want to make and the experimenting and the weird shots and all this stuff is in direct conflict with the expectations of an audience and the money part of the movie making business. And so in this movie, the backer is a gangster and he couldn't care less about the content. He just wants something that's going to sell, and what he believes will sell is sex. And so this is Sing's conflict throughout the movie, is how can he feel like he is creating art when he's constrained in this way to make a sex movie. And as the movie goes on, we explore all these little moments of discovery that Sing has about how art can adapt to the constraints of commerce. There's like a really great scene where, again, he's talking with his cameraman, and his cameraman is looking and watching all these old sex movies and talking about the artistry in these sex films and like how the people that were making them were real filmmakers too, and they were using interesting techniques to create these movies. And we see throughout the film all the ways that all the people around Sing and the people creating this movie are all working together to create something that is more than just like this product, right? So it actually has a very wholesome message, and that is that the passion of the people around the work are what allows it to be something that is elevated to the status of art. So often we hear about the idea of art as being this director's vision, right? Like the director is the captain who forces through like what he thinks this movie should be, and this is art. And if we don't have that, then you know, we're not going to get something good. But in this movie, the director is someone who doubts his ability, and it's the producer who covers for him when he wants to quit and like allows him to keep this job going. It's his girlfriend who convinces him when he has doubts about taking this job and says, no, you should do it. You're a filmmaker, make the movie. It's his mother who, when he is feeling guilty about this bad work that he's doing, kind of tells him like, you know, when I was young, I used to watch sex movies, and she gives him a little interesting detail that he takes into his work and like improves his film so much. She tells him, make sure that your actress has clean feet, because bad movies, the actresses have dirty feet. And so at one point in the movie, he cleans the feet, and that like kind of is this symbolic expression of him elevating his work and taking it from something that is nobody cares about to putting thought and care into the scene. And then later, it's this lowly production assistant, like the lowest person on the film, who, when there's a fire, he saves all the film and makes it so the movie can be released. And even the final joke of the movie, the very last shot, which is something I won't spoil because if you see this movie, it's a funny little moment. But the final shot of the movie is also this metaphor for the fact that a film crew works as one. They work together. They're a community that needs to support each other and support each other's work. And that's what makes it so good. And it's honestly something that's very beautiful to watch, especially if you're a filmmaker or you're into films, because really, I can tell you that working on a film set with a crew and working together for a common vision of something that you care about, there's really nothing better than that. That feeling that you get when your team is clicking and gelling is just great. And I think this movie really captures that feeling at the end. The final piece of this movie that I really don't want to ignore is the acting is actually very phenomenal in it. Leslie Cheung, who you may have seen in a lot of art films, really elevates this film with a grounded, introspective performance. And I think that's what keeps the tangents and the dream sequences artistic rather than just feeling like wacky and weird. Everything he does in these dream sequences is very emotionally driven. Unfortunately, there's a really sad parallel, and the sadness of the character and the kind of introspective self-doubt that he has to the actor in real life. He took his own life, and it was purported to be because he, didn't feel artistically fulfilled. We also get Shu Qi in this film, who is one of my favorite actresses. And the arc in this film, very interestingly, also parallels her own life. I think Shu Qi, in my personal opinion, is one of the greatest success stories of all time when it comes to actresses. She moved to Hong Kong from Taiwan and started performing in these terrible Category 3 films. Like, there's some old ones that I might explore later on this channel that she's in that are just like bad, gross, weird movies. But she continued to be in these films and worked her way up. And then when she finally makes it to this movie, she wins Best Supporting Actress at the Hong Kong Film Awards for her performance in this film. And after that, she becomes like an art film darling. She comes back to Taiwan and works for Ho Xiaoxian. She does all these great art films, and now she's considered one of like the greatest art actresses of Asia. And this real life arc that she goes through is actually mimicked in this film. At the beginning, you think she's gonna be this one-dimensional joke, like this character that's like, oh, it's funny, she's like the stupid actress that is not good at acting, and like the director is gonna have to figure out a way to make his movie work, even though he's stuck with this bad actress. But as the movie goes on, we realize like, oh no, she's actually like a good actress, and she's actually like a interesting, unique person that has like a lot of thoughts and is complex. And her performance goes from being this funny kind of jokey like ah ha 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 to being very serious. And she has this very emotional monologue towards the end of the film where you learn all about her and her humanity is revealed, and you see that she's someone that wants to make her family proud and support them, and it's just very touching. And so there's so many interesting meta layers to this performance. It's like in the movie, within the movie, she learns to be a good actress. In the actual movie, her performance starts out as comical and one-dimensional and becomes slowly very complex and interesting. And then in real life, Shu Qi herself started in these bad movies that are, basically softcore pornography, and then became one of the greatest art house actresses of all time. And so it's very interesting to kind of see that progression on so many levels. Towards the end of the film, we see this artistically shot sex scene, and it's a little blurry, and there's like overlaid bodies moving and stuff. And what we get at the end of this film is a scene that is both erotic and artistic. And I think this is a very important thing to include in the movie, because it proves that yes, it is possible to make something that is artistic, but also within these insane limitations that the industry and the money puts on you. And the reason that's possible throughout the movie, as we find, is because you have good people working with you and you're working together to create this interesting piece of art. That was a message that really touched me as a filmmaker. Viva Erotica is a movie that filmmakers should watch and think about, because maybe today making a sex movie isn't a way to make money really anymore. But there are these other avenues that maybe people or filmmakers consider to be beneath them. And they think, I don't want to do that because that's not artistic. I want to make X, right? But the real measure of an artist is how you take your opportunity and you turn it into something that you can be proud of. And I think that's a cool message in this film, and one that everybody should see. If you like this channel, share it with your friends. Let me know in the comments what you think. Give me suggestions for new reviews, new movies that you can do. As always, like, share, subscribe, tell your friends. We really appreciate it, and we'll see you next time.